Hi, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I'm Maddie from the marketing team here at Castora. So the presentation that we have for you today is a part of a series of webinars that we're doing every Wednesday in March that we're calling Webinarch Madness. So get excited, basketball fans. The presentation we have today is actually from a conference, our very first conference that we hosted last October in New York City called Karma, Customer Analytics for Retail Marketers. And it's a presentation that Professor Eric Schwartz from the University of Michigan Ross Business School gave. Eric is really at the forefront of academic research in customer lifetime value and testing. So it was one of our most popular sessions, and we wanted to be able to share it with a broader audience. So as always, if you have questions, please chat them during the webinar, and if we can't answer them, then we'll make sure we are able to get back to you. We'll be sharing the deck and recording after the webinar, and we're going to quickly launch with a poll before we get started. And the question we're asking is, which of the following metrics does your team use? So there are 5 options. First, return on ad spend, then average order value, customer lifetime value, cost per acquisition, and then CLV to CPA ratio, sometimes called CAC, your customer acquisition cost. So we'll give you guys a couple of minutes to answer that, and then we'll get the presentation started. All right, I'm going to close the poll now and share the results. So most of you guys are using cost per acquisition, but obviously these are not mutually exclusive. So that's really interesting. What Eric is going to talk about most today is the CLV to CPA ratio, which is what the fewest of you guys are using. So I think it'll be interesting. I think that says to me that this is still a fairly academic concept, or maybe just less implementable at this moment. So hopefully today will be really edifying. Cool.
This is me. You can find more about me, website, Twitter, email me. I am really happy to talk to anyone and everyone about what you're doing, what I'm doing, how we could possibly even work together. I'm fueled by data and interesting problems. I'm a professor of customer analytics. I've been at Ross now, this is my 4th year. And a lot of what I do is boiled down to these 5 letters. 5 letters that we spent some time today talking about: customer lifetime value, what a lot of us call A/B testing, what others would just call good scientific thinking or randomization and good experiments. And a lot of the conversations have separated these two. Some have put them absolutely together. That's what I do. I really think a lot about, in my research and work with companies and in teaching, to find ways to put thinking about predictive future value of customers together with, so what should we do about it? And the answer almost always from me is going to be, let's run a test to check this, or let's run a test so we can, etc. So you're going to hear a lot about that. I'm not going to talk about what customer lifetime value is. I'm glad I don't need to, thanks to companies like yourselves. But what I do want to talk about is some of these problems that we've heard throughout today, and I'll refer to my notes to make sure that I'm giving credit where credit is due. But looking at my customer base, how much value can I expect? We've heard a bit about customer equity at different times. Ben may have dropped the word customer equity. We've heard about looking at a cohort of customers. What can we expect from them? This is what a lot of you are thinking when you're saying CLV. What should I decide? Which of my existing customers to target? Right? And how should I allocate my budget to best allocate for acquisition spend? I'm going to talk about each of these questions in different ways throughout this talk, The answer, again, for the how is going to be, how should we optimally test this? The answers for how much value can I expect is going to be using predictive CLV models, but also ways to slice it. So those are going to be some themes. Here are some other topics that are going to pop in throughout this 30 minutes or so. And talk about, yes, CLV is forward-looking. What does that mean? I think we heard bits of it from Kelly just a moment ago. But really, how can we use it? One thing that a lot of you have been talking about today is ways to use it, or that you're using it as benchmark. I'm going to try to push as much as I can on that. I'm happy to go further as well. I'm not just going to talk about A/B testing. I'm going to try to push, again, further on that to smarter testing. We can do better than just randomization. We're beyond that now. Right? We can really go beyond. And so we'll spend some time talking about that. Let me stand here for those of you who have really looked inside CLV models. These pictures look familiar to you. This is how I view the world. This is it. Sorry, guys. It's just that spreadsheet of rows as people and time in the columns. This is really the core of all of your CLV models. It's the story that not all customers are treated equally, and so we shouldn't treat all customers equally. We don't have the same expectations for all customers. I heard earlier, just about an hour ago, there is no average customer, but then sometimes we say, but if we were talking about an average customer, who would she be? Fine, but let's not forget the first part of that clause. There is no average customer. What I also want to mention is we often talk about here customer lifetime value. Let's be a little more careful. You're going to hear me refer to predicting future customer value. Standing in the middle of this, here we are right in the middle of this, is where most of you are looking. And you're looking backwards at the past there, past data, trying to make forecasts about the future. Right? It's no longer the entire lifetime of a customer. We're no longer counting what we've got before. It's some remaining customer value. So if you're thinking about what is the customer value in the next quarter, what is the customer value over the next 6 months or a year, or perhaps 5 years out, call it what it is. Right? It's not, if you really want to call customer lifetime value, standing at time one, from moment of acquisition, just before you acquire that customer, before that first purchase, now we're really talking about lifetime value. Okay? In exactly this timeline, I heard just moments ago, let's not talk about win-backs. Let's talk about churn and attrition prevention. Yes, thank you. Right? Because the reality is, you don't really know when most of your customers are gone. You just assume so. It's been long enough. So it is a continuous scale, using these probabilities of buying in the next year. Scoring your customers with these probabilities, or being a bit more explicit about that uncertainty that you have. So own it. Realize that these are uncertain probabilities. But I want to call attention to the money bags that are sitting here. As it should look like, we are talking about an asset. We are talking about customers as assets. And although that concept has been dropped a couple of times, I think I heard it as an annuity, yes. So let's start talking about customers the way we would talk about other business assets that you have. Right? We talk about amortization of the customers. Right? You talk about the kinds of investments where you talk about positive cash flow investments in every customer and every customer segment. So it's that kind of mentality that I'd be advocating for. I now want to get into the black box. There was a moment, Brett earlier talked a little bit about what getting inside the secret sauce. So now I'm going to reveal the secret sauce of Kastora. No, I'm just not going to do that. But it's really important to dig a little deeper. There isn't a magic silver bullet here. It really is a way of thinking about lifetime value. And it really begins with not just big data. It's not more data. It's the right data. It's the right data summaries. Fortunately, I think I heard RFM once or twice, but I think I heard it in a slightly derogatory way. I want to bring it back because what many of you don't fully appreciate is that's still the backbone. That's the backbone. It is the RFM summaries that are still the backbone of all the right ways of thinking about customer lifetime value. It does turn out to be that recency, frequency, monetary value. You take all your big data, and what I'll often say is, great, you've got customer sentiment data. You've got real specific category information down to the SKU or really specific demographic information or time-varying marketing variables that or competition variables or seasonality. Awesome. Show me it matters above and beyond what your predictive model using just the basic summary says. And if it is, great, let's use it. Right? If it's not, we're back to what we already know for a good 50, 60 years of direct marketing, back when people only used catalogs before we put everything digital. We're really used to using. So you're going to stay there for a second to think about this idea of, well, how does that really translate into the models? I think I'm going to take this one from Kelly when she just said a little while ago, these recency and frequency rules that you might be using to trigger emails or to call someone active or at risk, those rules are pretty arbitrary because you're going to use them for the entire customer base. But you know that shouldn't be the case because customers differ. And so underlying these models are taking that into account. So for instance, I'll often say that Amazon, if you look at their financial statement, when they have to talk about their active customers, they have to refer to customers that have purchased in the past year, right? Because they don't really, forgetting about Prime, they're a non-contractual retailer like most of you, so they have to make statements about these cutoffs like who has purchased in the past year. Well, for me personally, I hope they don't use that year cutoff for me because I purchase so much right now on Amazon at such a high clip, probably several times a month. If I go 8 weeks without buying at Amazon, I would like Amazon, the two Amazon folks back there, please contact my family because I might actually be dead. So these kind of recency, frequency, monetary value calculations are precisely what's inside the box, what's inside that black box. It's that kind of trade-off that we're talking about. And the goal is, if I had to state it simply, let's build the most intuitive model of customer lifetime value, future value, based on past recency, frequency, monetary value. And that's what we get, something that I like to refer to as probability models for customer-based analysis. It makes sense. There's a nice story. You heard this story that a customer is going to be active and might be cooling down for a little bit and eventually fades. We all die. Sorry, our customers die. Customers go off. It's inevitable. You cannot prevent attrition forever. It's going to happen. Accept it. Be mindful of this fact. Right? We're in Soho. I passed 3 mindfulness studios on the way here. It's fine. Right? It's fine. Right? Really? 2. Sorry. It makes sense, but it also works. One thing I did not see at all today was anyone asking, hey, how good are your predictions? Ask them more. Hold all of each other to a higher standard. Because what you want to be seeing is graphs that look like this. And this is really what is underlying a lot of these models. There's a canonical data set from an early e-commerce company, taking a cohort of people that were acquired through these 13 weeks and just watching them over time. Look at these figures. Don't just look at your 40x ROI, which I love. That's great based on using CLV, but make sure the models are doing their job and working right. And I've got news for you. They probably are, but you better check them out. And what you're going to see, any deviations around those models will be highly informative to improve the models and bring it back to your analytics team, bring it back to your vendors and say, hey, we're noticing this. Are you noticing this? So don't be afraid to get inside the box. What you are seeing here, by the way, is the dotted line is the forecast, only using a model based on half the data and forecasting out. Right? Churn, attrition is predictable. That's why this works. That's really why this isn't magic. It is just the fact that customers eventually drop out. Here's another figure that is underutilized. It's the conditional expectations plot, if you're a real geek. It's conditional expectation using Bayes' theorem. If you're not a data nerd like myself or some of the data scientists here, what you really want to say is, if you made 4 purchases in the past 4 months, how many purchases are you going to make in the next 4 months? If you made 3 purchases, how many transactions can I expect from you in the subsequent period? It's not a 45-degree line. It's not a diagonal line. We know that. It looks something like this. What's remarkable about these models, unlike a lot of the big machine learning algorithms that you're going to see, is these models are telling a story. So you don't just get one prediction of a curve like this, which you actually can get from a lot of different methods. From the exact same analysis, you're getting pictures like this. I don't know if you can see this, but those are 2 lines sitting on top of each other because the predictions are that good. That's actual and predicted. So, great. How should I use these kind of estimates? I've heard some ideas, but I want to be able to run through a couple of ideas, some of which were mentioned, some of which were not, some of which weren't fully fleshed out. To start, as much as possible. These CLV numbers, or expected future customer value numbers, should be at the table all the time. There's no reason not to. These are assets and you're spending money. You're investing. You would never have a conversation about your stock portfolio or your financial services, any part of that, without talking about expected returns. You wouldn't. That's all we're doing here. That's all we're doing. You wouldn't just have a conversation about costs, which is what we often do when we're just talking about budgets. Scoring customers. I don't really need to get into this. Most of you are already doing this. Scoring customers. The big insight is you don't, after scoring those customers, we've learned from these different tiers, many of you are using these tiers, treat your customers differently. The extra bump that I'm going to add here is within treating them differently, within treating your highest scoring future value customers differently than your likely to be gone or almost in the 50-60% buying over the next year category, that's where you should be starting to test. To say within this cohort of customers, within customers that are 50-50 to ever buy from us again, let's look at a set of actions that we might want to be taking there. I'm going to return to that in just a couple of minutes. The question of what should our trigger be, or what should this one-time campaign be? A lot of conversation, especially over the breakout session after lunch, about those kind of triggers or scheduled promotions. Part of the prompts were, at least in my group and the other group, was whether we were going to run free with promotions or not. The ROI in promotion, ROI in, or ROAS, whether it's advertising spend, should always, always, always be expected change in that customer value in the future over whatever the cost it is to implement. This sounds simple, and plenty of folks are nodding, but you know you don't calculate this all the time. You know you don't, and you know you should. Right? Great, but what should we do? How am I going to make that delta in future value actually grow? And this is where the testing comes in. And I will continue asking, as I continue conversations with folks later today and throughout the coming weeks, if you'd like, I will keep asking, what are you doing in testing? What are you doing in testing? What are you testing? And so let's talk a little bit about testing and go beyond A/B testing. Yes, there's a lot of tests happening. People look in Silicon Valley, decided that we're going to call the experimental method and randomized controlled trials from 1925 something new. Fine, we will. They've done us a bit of a disservice by saying A and B, because stop just using 2 treatment and controls, at least 3 or more, or a true multivariate test, as it was called about 5 or 6 years ago. We're using MVT a bit more. Throw in a couple of factors. You're going to be getting a bigger bang for your buck for the upfront cost of setting up your experiment. You're going to be able to answer questions of why did this treatment, this promotion work better than the other, because you've got many attributes worked in. Folks are running so many tests right now, and I was hearing it a bit, almost at this extreme, but let me go to the absolute extreme. Suppose you're, I think Terry over lunch might have been saying this at ShopBot, we're always running an experiment. Every email is a test. Great. Well, if every email is a test and every ad buy is part of a test, which should be, then suddenly testing is not this one-off thing that we do every once in a while. It is part of our regular marketing actions. And it itself needs to be optimized. We can't just say, we're going to run a test for 3 months and see how well it goes. We need to optimize that process of running the test. And that's where I'm going to go beyond just test and learn. This isn't about run a test, look backwards, and learn it and roll out. It's great that we're doing that. That should be the gold standard. Now go above and beyond. One way to do that, suppose that I was just testing a display campaign for acquiring new customers, let's say. This is an actual example I happen to have worked with. Sure, you're going to run an experiment, pick the winner, run with the winner. Fine. You can see there are some attributes, what I was referring to in terms of size, layout, message, and creative. But this is really the problem. This isn't about test and learn. It's about how can we be earning while we're learning. This is not just a learn, then earn game. This is let's be earning while we're learning. Because the regular question is, how should I reallocate my budget? That's really the question in the back of your mind. Although the way we implement it often in A/B testing is, how should I allocate my budget uniformly across all actions, and then 100% to one action and 0 to all the others. Let's smooth that out over time. And that procedure is actually a fairly well-defined procedure in some of these dorkier fields, and it's starting to creep out into testing. It's this iterative process. Like Ben mentioned, this iterative, what is it? Think, act, do, or do, thing. Plan, do, check. It's been a while since I've taught that one, but it's not a 2x2, so I can't remember it. Because in business schools, that's all we can remember. But this is what I'm referring to. Suppose that your 2 treatments, your treatment and control, or your email variant 1 and email variant 2, were just slot machines. Slot machines are sometimes referred to old-timey language, a one-armed bandit. You put money in, you lose your money. But suppose that you walked into a casino and you saw 2 slot machines. When I say slot machines, I want you to think email variants. I want you to think source of acquisition. I want you to think your keyword search terms or your particular discount level or promotion details. You're going to play this arm. You're going to play this slot machine. What you'd like to do is make as much money as you can. Well, the one issue is you don't know which one's better. And so if you have some data that suggests, all right, yeah, the red one on average looks better, but this blue one actually might be even better. On average, it looks not as great. There's a good chance that it's better, with these being the uncertainty bounds. This is actually what you're looking at when you peek at your A/B test results in the meantime, while the test is running. You're seeing that. Well, it turns out we can do something about that. We actually can act. This is known as the multi-arm bandit problem. Often it looks more like this. You shouldn't just have just 2 treatment control, though that's a great starting place. You have many arms, many variants of your emails that you could possibly test. And as quickly as possible, you want to be reallocating those resources away from the losers, the ones that are likely to not be the best, and heavying up on the ones that are likely to be those winners. This is what it can look like. What you're seeing here is, in real time, a multi-arm bandit being played out, where you've got 3 treatments, the blue, the green, and the red, be it your 3 emails, and you're quickly getting feedback right away. So you take an action, you get feedback. And you might say, well, no, that doesn't really represent what I'm doing. Well, we are acting as if it does. And what you're seeing here is, as the red one truly was the best, so it turns out to be 60%, 50%, 40% conversion rate, somewhere in there, 61, 52, 43. During the test, we didn't waste a third of our budget on the blue, a third of our budget on the green. We find the wins as quickly as possible. So where does this thinking go? How far can we push this? We've pushed it to, at least I've pushed it to, over 700 million impressions for one particular campaign a few years ago for a really low conversion event, financial services, where the customer lifetime value is high. A small increase, a 10% increase, 8% increase is quite meaningful when you haven't changed cost per acquisition at all. All we've done is figure out which ad to serve on which website. This multi-arm bandit problem. The core of that question is this desire to learn. You want to continue exploring and experimenting, but you also have a desire to start using that information as quickly as possible. There are some principled ways to do that, and that's really on the edge of where smart business experimentation is headed. It's starting to creep into some of these testing providers, but find out and really start getting in there. How else? Let me just wrap up with a couple of thoughts here on acquisition and retention. Where does what I was just talking about on testing come to really matter about lifetime value? Here it is. We're talking about acquisition versus retention. If you had an extra dollar, where would you put it? A lot of the themes here, I'm getting a retention-y vibe. Or super customer focused. Right? Maybe I'm getting a 75-25 retention vote from the eyes right here. Here are common quips. All right? Are we spending too much on acquisition? Are we simply just spending on acquisition, getting crappy customers in, they leave, and we're replacing existing customers with crappier customers? There's just customer rotation. It's a revolving door. I think a lot of you had already acknowledged that, and that's probably what's making you say, no, we've got to really think about retention. We have to think about the value of our customers. Great first step. Problem is, if you're just thinking about the value of those customers, you're not thinking about the incremental value. You're just thinking about the value of those customers. And a couple of folks have already talked about what's the possibility of too much loyalty programs, the possibility of too much focus on that great customer who's in the store all the time repeatedly, but is eroding your margins and actually is a negative profit customer. Just if she's in the store all the time, she probably knows how to get all the deals. She probably knows the prices of all the competitors, right? So it's not just about that retention effort. And so chase the low cost per acquisition, especially in media buying when we're talking about the rubber hits the road. What are you looking at? You want to increase conversion rates. You're taking a budget, you're dividing it by number of customers acquired. Clearly, you just need to lower cost per action. The CAC, right? The cost of acquisition for customer acquisition costs. You're going to be getting some low-value customers. You're going to back to where we started, that low-value customer. So yes, as the past speakers have just said, just moments ago, everything should be about CLV per CPA. That is the ROI ratio on the table. The decisions being made, whether it's incremental CLV, if it's for a retention action like a promotion or a loyalty program or a direct mail campaign, or if it's an acquisition action, then we're really talking about the entire customer lifetime value over that cost per acquisition. And yes, you might quip about, oh, attribution this, attribution that. One word for you. Experiment. It was mentioned just in the last chat. Well, once you run an experiment, you're going to get past that attribution issue. I agree, multi-touch attribution is a problem. It's not going away. It's a really interesting problem to solve. It's put several of my colleagues in great positions of tenure for claiming to solve that problem. They haven't solved it. The Academy still thinks that people have and also believes they haven't. It's not solved. But that's a backwards looking accounting problem. Look forward, run the test, create the right data that you wish you had so that you could do attribution, and that's through a smart experimental design. You know the experiment that ideally you would want, you can run that. Right? Let the CLV, this is to begin wrapping up here, let the CLV guide your willingness to pay for customers. We all talked about pricing. A couple of folks talked about everyday low pricing or value-based pricing or cost-plus pricing. Well, what is your price for a customer? How do you value your customer? I would hope it's not everyday low pricing, but though a lot of actions indicate that it is. I would hope that it is more about the value per cost. All these other ways that you're making decisions don't line up with the way we're thinking about acquiring and retaining and preventing churn. Let's change that. And this is the group to actually do it. What is that maximum willingness to pay? Everything's going to be about CLV over CPA. Or remaining future value, incremental future value over the cost of that action. And finally, it doesn't stop at conversion. I'm going to spend it sounds like I'm saying it's all about acquisition. Well, it could be if you found the right customers. It really could be. You have an amazing relationship with your customers and have an amazing retention rate if you just get the right ones to start. Or if you start divorcing the bad ones. I heard that word earlier today and love it. The question of when should you really divorce customers? I think Dress Barn example, we were talking about that. It doesn't end at the end of the funnel, and we know that. And so we shouldn't obsess on optimizing just through the funnel or even at any one point in the life cycle. But if you were going to really ask the question, this balance between quantity and quality, excuse me while I skip these, the question really is, how should I sequentially allocate my acquisition budget? Across my different sources of acquisition, my different channels of acquisition, or segments, if you will, to maximize long-run customer equity. That's the problem a lot of us have in our mind. I'm not going to pretend to solve this perfectly, but let me just close here with a framework for doing so. And that's going to look as follows. It's going to combine the CLV number with the adaptive A/B testing, that multi-arm bandit that I was just talking about. So we're going to start with equally distributing our budget at the beginning of time. We're going to acquire some customers. They're all equal numbers from all colors. And slowly but surely, we're going to see that cohort evolve. We're going to get another cohort of customers. And we're going to start heavying up on the source of acquisition that are starting to look better and start lightening up on the source of acquisition that aren't panning out. It sounds intuitive. You're doing it in certain ways. But make it a bit more systematic. Because as time is going to go on, you're going to be sitting with some customers who have left, some customers who have stayed, and looking backwards, what this has been will have been a perfect experiment where you're optimizing throughout that experiment to start finding the higher CLV for CPA customers. And you could argue about what those metrics should be. Should it be actually CLV? Should it be likely buy in the next 3 months? Should it be, what should be in that numerator? Maybe it shouldn't be CLV. Fine, hash it out. Figure what that should be. The reality is, it's probably going to be about future value. And the reason is, it ought to be forward-looking. We can come up with lots of ways to stand here in the middle and talk about, all right, we have multiple customers. Too many bills. But what we really care about is figuring out which one is likely to be the best paying slot machine. You're paying money for customers, whether you like it or not. We are, when it comes to acquisition, and this is the name of the game. Doing so adaptively, what I can tell you in running these many simulations on real and synthetic data ends up being future customer value wins. If you're looking for what's the right metric, should I look at the best customers in the past? Should I look at the which acquisition channel has the highest number of active customers? The answer will always be predict. Look to the future. Make your decision about those acquisition channels, not just based on how many people came or how valuable they have been, but if I acquire a customer from that channel today, how valuable will she be for the rest of that year or for the rest of her time with the firm? That's where I'm going to wrap up here. The closing thoughts really is going to be what I've given you is a bit of a tour through some notions of CLV, some bits of A/B testing, some ways to combine the two. Some of this should be already familiar and wrapping up a bit of what we've talked about. Hopefully it's pushed just a little beyond that. This is cutting edge work. I haven't given you too much of the geeky stuff. I would be happy to do so. And this is really my pitch, and hopefully I won't regret this invitation, but send me an email. Let's talk. Whether it's with Custora or without Custora, whether you're a customer, not a customer, I want to hear what you're doing. And I want to hear what the data that you have and ways that we could possibly talk and improve marketing actions and really focus on customer analytics and improving this community.
Thank you so much to everyone for joining, and I hope that you'll join us next Wednesday at the same time. We're going to have Ron Ophir here, who is the CEO and founder of Ophir Consulting, and he was a former executive at brands like Michael Kors, Coach, Gap, and Banana Republic. He will be speaking about driving omnichannel growth with a digital flagship, so we hope you'll join. Thanks so much. Once again, we will share the deck and recording. Have a good one.